Sarah Martinez had always believed that small acts of kindness could change the world, even if only one person at a time. At 28 years old, she worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in downtown Chicago, a job that had taught her to see beyond the surface of people's lives. Every morning, she walked the same route to work, passing through Lincoln Park where the city's homeless population often gathered. It was on a particularly cold Tuesday morning in November that Sarah first noticed him. The man sat hunched against a brick wall near the park's entrance, his weathered hands wrapped around a paper cup that steamed weakly in the frigid air. His clothes were layered, but inadequate for the approaching winter, and his face bore the kind of exhaustion that comes from years of struggle. What struck Sarah most, however, was his eyes. Despite everything, they held a dignity that the streets hadn't managed to steal. Sarah had passed homeless individuals countless times before, often dropping spare change or offering a kind word. But something about this man made her pause. Perhaps it was the way he sat so quietly, not asking for anything, simply existing in a world that seemed determined to ignore him. Or maybe it was the small American flag pin attached to his worn jacket, barely visible, but somehow significant. "Excuse me," Sarah said softly, approaching him with care. "Are you hungry?" The man looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers with a mixture of surprise and wariness. "I don't want to be a burden, miss," he replied, his voice rough from disuse but carrying traces of education and refinement. "You're not a burden," Sarah assured him. "I'm Sarah. What's your name?" "Marcus," he said after a moment's hesitation. "Marcus Thompson." "Well, Marcus, there's a diner just around the corner. Would you like to join me for breakfast?" "My treat." Marcus studied her face, searching for any sign of pity or condescension. Finding none, he slowly nodded. "That's very kind of you, Sarah. I'd like that." The diner was warm and filled with the comforting aroma of coffee and bacon. Sarah chose a corner booth where Marcus could sit with his back to the wall, sensing his need to observe his surroundings. When a waitress approached, Sarah ordered generously: eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, and coffee for both of them. As they waited for their food, Sarah learned fragments of Marcus's story. He was a veteran, she discovered, though he didn't elaborate on his service. He'd been on the streets for nearly 3 years, after a series of unfortunate events had stripped away his support system. He spoke carefully, choosing his words with precision, and Sarah recognized the bearing of someone who had once held responsibility and command. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said as their breakfast arrived. "I'm not your problem to solve." "You're not a problem," Sarah replied firmly. "You're a person who deserves a hot meal and some conversation. We all need that sometimes." They ate mostly in comfortable silence, Marcus savoring each bite with the appreciation of someone who never knew when the next meal might come. Sarah found herself studying his mannerisms, the way he carefully arranged his napkin, how he thanked the waitress with genuine courtesy. This was a man who had been raised with values, who had served something greater than himself. When they finished, Sarah paid the bill and walked with Marcus back to his spot in the park. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. Marcus looked confused. "Tomorrow, if you'd like. I pass this way every morning on my way to work. We could make it a regular thing." "Why would you want to do that?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Because everyone deserves to know that someone cares about them. Because sharing a meal makes both people less alone. Because it's the right thing to do." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that very much." True to her word, Sarah appeared the next morning, and the next, and the next. What began as simple breakfast meetings evolved into something deeper. She learned that Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a Marine sergeant, that he'd lost his wife to cancer while he was deployed, and that a combination of PTSD, survivor's guilt, and financial hardship had eventually led him to the streets. Sarah never pushed for details, but gradually, Marcus began to share more of his story. He told her about his squad, young men who had looked to him for guidance and protection. He spoke of the weight of responsibility he'd carried and the crushing guilt he felt over the friends who hadn't made it home. His voice would grow quiet when he mentioned his late wife, Helen, and how he'd been unable to save her, just as he'd been unable to save his fellow Marines. Winter deepened, and Sarah's morning ritual became the anchor of both their days. She brought extra blankets when the temperature dropped, thermal socks when she noticed his worn shoes, and always, she brought respect and genuine friendship. She never treated Marcus as a charity case or a project to be fixed. Instead, she treated him as what he was, a good man who had served his country and fallen on hard times. The other hospital staff began to notice Sarah's routine. Some questioned why she spent her time and money on that homeless man, but Sarah's closest friend and fellow nurse, Jennifer, understood. "You see something in him that others miss," Jennifer observed one day. "I see a hero who's been forgotten," Sarah replied. "I see someone who gave everything for his country and got nothing in return except invisible wounds that no one wants to acknowledge." As weeks turned to months, Marcus began to change. The defeated posture gradually straightened. His eyes, while still carrying sadness, regained some of their alertness. He started sharing stories not just of loss and pain, but of brotherhood, honor, and the pride he'd once felt in serving. Sarah realized that their morning conversations were healing something in both of them. One particularly snowy morning in January, Sarah arrived to find Marcus cleaning up litter around his usual spot. "Can't have the park looking messy," he explained with a slight smile. It was the first time she'd seen him smile, and it transformed his entire face. "That's very thoughtful of you," Sarah said. "Helen always said that if you're going to be somewhere, you might as well make it better than you found it," Marcus replied. "I'd forgotten that for a while." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "She sounds like she was a wonderful woman. She would have liked you, Sarah." She always said the world needed more people who acted instead of just talked about acting. Their breakfast that morning felt different, lighter somehow. Marcus told Sarah about his plans to visit the VA office, something he'd been avoiding for years. "Maybe it's time to stop running from help," he said. "Maybe it's time to trust that there are still good people in the world who want to help without expecting anything in return." Sarah reached across the table and briefly squeezed his hand. "There are, Marcus. There always have been. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us." As spring approached, Marcus's transformation became even more apparent. He'd managed to get clean clothes from a local charity, had trimmed his beard, and carried himself with increasing confidence. The VA had connected him with counseling services and was working on finding him temporary housing. But through all these changes, his morning routine with Sarah remained constant. "You know," Marcus said one April morning as they sat in their usual booth, "I used to think that my life was over, that I had nothing left to offer the world. But these past months with you have reminded me that sometimes the most important battles we fight aren't on foreign soil. Sometimes they're right here, in our own communities, one person at a time." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "You've taught me just as much, Marcus. You've shown me what real courage looks like. Not the kind that wins medals, but the kind that gets you up each day when everything feels hopeless. I want you to know something," Marcus said seriously. "What you've done for me, the way you've treated me like I matter, like I'm still the man I used to be instead of just what I've become, it saved my life. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it literally. There were days when our breakfast was the only thing that kept me going." Sarah wiped her eyes with her napkin. "You matter, Marcus. You've always mattered. I just hope you're starting to remember that." "I am," he said firmly. "And when I get back on my feet, really back on my feet, I'm going to find a way to pay it forward. Maybe not the same way you did, but in whatever way I can. That's a promise." As summer arrived, Marcus's situation continued to improve. The VA had found him a small studio apartment in a transitional housing program, and he'd started volunteering at a local shelter, helping other veterans navigate the system. But he never missed their morning breakfast, and Sarah never stopped looking forward to seeing his familiar face each day. One morning in late June, Marcus seemed particularly excited about something. "Sarah, I have something to tell you," he said as soon as she sat down. "Good news, I hope." "The best. I've been accepted into a job training program through the VA. It's for building maintenance and facilities management. If I complete it successfully, they'll help place me in permanent employment. Sarah beamed at him. Marcus, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, he said. Without these mornings, without someone believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You gave me back my dignity, Sarah. You helped me remember who I am underneath all the pain and fear. You were always that person, Marcus. You just needed someone to see it. As they finished their breakfast that morning, Marcus pulled out a small wrap package. I have something for you, he said, looking almost shy. Sarah unwrapped it carefully to find a simple silver locket. Marcus, you didn't need to open it, he said. Inside was a tiny photograph of an American flag and an inscription to Sarah, who showed a forgotten soldier that he was never truly alone. With eternal gratitude, Marcus. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus replied. For everything. For seeing past the outside to the man within. For treating me with respect when the world had forgotten I existed. For reminding me that there's still good in this world worth fighting for. As they parted that morning, both knew that their relationship had evolved into something profound. Sarah had gained not just the satisfaction of helping someone in need, but a true friend whose wisdom and perspective had enriched her own life. Marcus had regained a sense of worth and purpose, but more importantly, he'd rediscovered his faith in human kindness. Neither of them could have imagined that their simple morning routine would set in motion events that would soon bring together honor, tradition, and love in ways they never could have anticipated. The seeds of something extraordinary had been planted in those quiet breakfast conversations, and soon those seeds would bloom into a moment that would touch the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. But for now, they were content with what they had built together. A friendship that had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can create the most profound transformations, not just in the lives we touch, but in our own hearts as well. 2 years had passed since that first cold morning when Sarah Martinez had offered Marcus Thompson a warm breakfast. The man who now sat across from her in their regular booth bore little resemblance to the broken veteran she'd first encountered. Marcus had not only completed his job training program, but had been hired as the head of facilities management at a large downtown office complex. His studio apartment had been upgraded to a modest one-bedroom, and he'd begun rebuilding relationships with family members he'd lost touch with during his darkest years. Yet through all these changes, their morning ritual remained sacred. Every Tuesday and Friday, Sarah and Marcus met at Mel's Diner at 7:30 sharp, sharing breakfast and conversation that had evolved from tentative friendship into something resembling family. I have news, Sarah announced one Friday morning in September, her cheeks glowing with excitement as she slid into the worn vinyl booth. Marcus looked up from his coffee, immediately noting the barely contained joy in her expression. Over their years of friendship, he'd become expert at reading her moods. Good news, by the look of it. The best news, Sarah confirmed, extending her left hand across the table. A modest but beautiful diamond ring caught the morning light streaming through the diner's windows. Marcus's face broke into the widest smile Sarah had ever seen from him. Sarah, when? Who? Tell me everything. His name is David Chun. He's a social worker at the Children's Hospital. We met 6 months ago when his department was coordinating with ours for a patient. We've been dating ever since, and last night he proposed. Sarah's words tumbled over each other in her excitement. Marcus reached across the table and gently took her hand, examining the ring with the appreciation of someone who understood the significance of such moments. It's beautiful, Sarah. You're beautiful. You're glowing. I feel like I'm glowing. Marcus, I've never been this happy. David is wonderful. He's kind and dedicated, and he makes me laugh. He works with disadvantaged kids, trying to find them stable homes and support systems. He understands what it means to care about people who others might overlook. He sounds perfect for you, Marcus said sincerely. When's the wedding? Next spring, May 15th. We want something small and meaningful, not a huge production, just family and close friends. Sarah paused, suddenly looking nervous. Marcus, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know you can say no if you're not comfortable. Marcus straightened, giving her his full attention. What is it? Would you walk me down the aisle? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with emotion and significance. Marcus's eyes widened, and Sarah saw his hands tremble slightly as he set down his coffee cup. Sarah, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. You want me to? Are you sure? Don't you have family who should— My father died when I was 12, Sarah interrupted gently. My mother remarried, and my stepfather's a good man, but we've never been close. My brothers live across the country. But you, Marcus, you've been like family to me. These past 2 years, you've been one of the most important people in my life. You've taught me about resilience, about honor, about never giving up on people. I can't imagine anyone I'd rather have beside me on the most important day of my life. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, struggling to compose himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah, that would be the greatest honor of my life, greater than any medal or commendation I ever received. To be trusted with something so precious, yes. Yes, I would be honored to walk you down the aisle. Both of them were crying now, drawing curious glances from other diners, but neither cared. The waitress, who had served them countless breakfasts over the years, approached with fresh coffee and knowing smile. Everything okay over here? She asked kindly. Everything's perfect, Sarah managed through her tears. Absolutely perfect. As autumn progressed, Sarah included Marcus in many of her wedding planning discussions. She valued his opinion and found that his military experience had given him excellent organizational skills. He helped her think through logistics, offered practical advice about everything from flower arrangements to reception timing, and served as a sounding board when she felt overwhelmed by decisions. More importantly, Marcus had become David's friend as well. Sarah had introduced them a few weeks after the engagement, worried about how her fiancé would react to her unusual friendship with a former homeless veteran. But David, true to the character Sarah had described, embraced Marcus immediately. Any man who helped shape the woman I'm marrying into who she is today is someone I want to know, David had said during their first meeting. The three of them had dinner together regularly, and Marcus often joked that he was gaining a son along with a daughter. During one of their planning sessions in November, Sarah brought up something that had been on her mind. Marcus, I know you don't talk much about your military service, and I don't want to push, but I'm curious about something. Marcus looked up from a seating chart they'd been reviewing. What's that? You mentioned once that you had a squad, men who looked up to you. Do you ever wonder what happened to them? The ones who made a home. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression growing distant. I think about them every day, he admitted. We were close, like brothers. But after Helen died and everything fell apart, I was too ashamed to reach out. How do you tell the men you once led that their sergeant ended up on the streets? How do you face people who believed in your strength when you couldn't even believe in yourself? Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. You could tell them the truth, that you went through hell and came out the other side, that you're human, and humans sometimes fall down before they get back up. I bet they'd be proud to see who you are now. Maybe, Marcus said uncertainly. I've thought about trying to find them, especially lately. Being part of your life, feeling like myself again, it's made me realize how much I miss that brotherhood. But I'm scared, Sarah. What if they're disappointed in who I became? What if they're proud of who you've become? Sarah countered. What if they've been wondering about you all these years, hoping you were okay? Marcus considered this. There's a Marine I served with, Tommy Rodriguez. He saved my life more times than I can count. We were like brothers. I heard through the grapevine years ago that he stayed in the Corps, made it to Master Sergeant. If anyone would understand, it would be Tommy. Why don't you try to find him? Sarah suggested. What's the worst that could happen? He doesn't respond? At least you'd know you tried. But what if he does respond? What if he's been looking for you too? The idea both terrified and excited Marcus. That night, he went home and spent hours on his computer searching military databases and social media for any trace of Tommy Rodriguez. It took several weeks and dead ends, but Finally, he found what he was looking for. Master Sergeant Thomas Rodriguez, stationed at Camp Pendleton in California. With shaking hands, Marcus crafted an email. He kept it simple, honest, and direct. Tommy, this is Marcus Thompson, your old squad leader from Afghanistan. I know it's been a long time, and I know I disappeared after we got back. I'd like to explain what happened and let you know I'm okay now. If you're willing to hear from an old friend who made some mistakes, but never forgot the honor of serving beside you, I'd like to tell you about the angel who helped me find my way back. Marcus. He stared at the message for an hour before finally hitting send, then spent the next 3 days checking his email obsessively. The response came on a Thursday morning, and Marcus was so nervous he almost didn't open it. Sarge, I can't believe it's really you. We've been looking for you for years. The whole squad has been worried sick. We knew about Helen, and we knew you were struggling, but when you went dark, we didn't know what to think. I'm just grateful you're alive and okay. Tell me everything, and tell me about this angel you mentioned. I have some stories to share too. It's so good to hear from you, brother. Semper Fi. Tommy. Marcus read the email 3 times before the words fully sank in. They had been looking for him. They cared. They wanted him back in their lives. That Friday, Marcus could barely contain his excitement when he met Sarah for breakfast. He wrote back. He said as soon as she sat down. Tommy wrote back, and Sarah, he said they've been looking for me. The whole squad. Sarah's face lit up with joy. Oh, Marcus, that's wonderful. How do you feel? Terrified, grateful, excited. Like maybe I'm not as alone in this world as I thought. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her the email. He wants to know about you, about the angel I mentioned. What did you tell him? The truth. That a nurse with the biggest heart in Chicago saved my life by treating me like I mattered. That she became the family I thought I'd lost. That she's getting married and asked me to walk her down the aisle, which is the greatest honor I could ever receive. And what did he say to that? Marcus grinned. He said it sounded like something we need to celebrate properly. He's talking about organizing a reunion of the old squad for your wedding, if you'd be okay with that. He says Marines know how to show up for family, and anyone who's family to me is family to them. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. Marcus, that would be incredible. But are you sure? Having them all there, it might bring up difficult memories. It might, Marcus agreed. But they'll also bring back good memories. And besides, I'm not the same broken man who ran away from his brothers 8 years ago. I'm stronger now, thanks to you. I think I'm ready to face my past with my head held high. Over the following weeks, Marcus reconnected with more members of his old squad. Through Tommy, he reached out to the 8 other Marines who had served under his command and survived their deployments. Some had stayed in the military, others had become civilians, but all of them responded with overwhelming joy at hearing from their former sergeant. The stories they shared with Marcus filled in the gaps of their lives since Afghanistan. Some had struggled with their own demons, others had thrived, but all of them had carried the lessons Marcus had taught them about honor, loyalty, and taking care of each other. Several mentioned how his leadership had shaped them into the men they'd become, how his example had guided them through difficult times even after they'd lost touch. You know what's funny? Marcus told Sarah during one of their breakfast meetings in January, I spent all these years thinking I'd failed them, that I'd let down the men who trusted me. But hearing their stories, learning about their lives, I realized that maybe I did give them something valuable after all. Maybe the leadership and values I tried to instill actually stuck. Of course they did, Sarah said firmly. You're a natural leader, Marcus. I've seen how you've mentored some of the younger guys at your work, how you volunteer with other veterans. A person doesn't lose those qualities just because they go through hard times. As the wedding date approached, the plans grew more elaborate. Tommy had coordinated with the other Marines, and 5 of them would be able to attend the wedding. They'd arranged to wear their dress blue uniforms, wanted to honor both Marcus and Sarah with the full ceremony and tradition of the Corps. Sarah, Marcus said one morning in early April, just over a month before the wedding, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Always, she replied. Are you sure about all of this? Having a group of Marines in full dress uniform at your wedding? It's going to draw attention. Make a statement. Some people might think it's too much or inappropriate, or Sarah cut him off with a firm shake of her head. Marcus Thompson, listen to me very carefully. These men are your brothers. They're coming to celebrate with us because they love you and they're grateful to have you back in their lives. Anyone who has a problem with that isn't someone whose opinion matters to me. Besides, David is thrilled about it. He says it's going to be the most meaningful wedding anyone's ever attended. Marcus smiled, but Sarah could see there was something else on his mind. What is it? She pressed. It's just, I keep thinking about Helen, about how she'll miss this day, miss seeing me back on my feet, miss meeting you and David. I wish she could be there to see that the man she loved and believed in didn't disappear forever, that he found his way back. Sarah reached across the table and took both of his hands in hers. Marcus, Helen is going to be there. She's going to be there in your strength, in your kindness, in the way you've chosen to live your life with honor. She's going to be there in the love you've shown me, in the family you've helped me build. Don't you see? Every good thing you've done since you've gotten back on your feet is a testament to the love you shared with her. She's there every time you choose hope over despair, every time you reach out to help someone else, every time you show the world the good man she fell in love with. Tears streamed down Marcus's face, but for the first time when he spoke about Helen, they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. Thank you, Sarah, for everything, for seeing who I could be when I couldn't see it myself, for giving me a family again, for letting me be part of the most important day of your life. Thank you, Sarah replied, for teaching me what real courage looks like, for showing me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love and support each other no matter what. For being the father I needed to walk me down the aisle, and the friend I'll treasure for the rest of my life. As they prepared to leave the diner that morning, both of them felt the weight and wonder of how much their lives had changed since that first cold morning years ago. Neither of them could have imagined that a simple act of kindness would lead to this moment, this family, this celebration of love and redemption and the unbreakable bonds that form between people who choose to see the best in each other. The stage was set for a wedding that would be about much more than the union of two people in love. It would be a celebration of the power of human kindness, the strength of chosen family, and the honor that comes from never giving up on each other. And at the center of it all would be a former homeless veteran who had rediscovered his worth through the love of a woman who had never stopped believing in the hero she'd seen beneath the pain. The morning of May 15th dawned clear and warm, with the kind of gentle spring sunshine that seemed to bless everything it touched. Sarah Martinez woke in her childhood bedroom at her mother's house, where she'd spent the night before her wedding, and felt a sense of profound peace settle over her. After years of caring for others as a nurse, years of extending kindness to those the world had forgotten, today she would be surrounded by love and celebration. Her mother, Elena, bustled around the room, hanging up Sarah's wedding dress and arranging flowers from the garden. Mija, are you nervous? She asked, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her face. Sarah smiled. Not nervous, exactly. Excited. Grateful. A little overwhelmed by how perfect everything feels. Your father would have been so proud to walk you down the aisle, Elena said softly, her eyes misting slightly. I know, Mama, but Marcus is the right choice. Daddy would have understood that. He always said the most important thing was to surround yourself with good people who love you. Marcus has been like family to me. Elena nodded. She had been skeptical at first when Sarah had told her about her friendship with a homeless veteran, and even more concerned when Sarah had announced her intention to have him walk her down the aisle. But over the past year, she'd gotten to know Marcus through holiday dinners and family gatherings, and she'd come to understand what her daughter saw in him. Marcus Thompson was a man of quiet dignity, deep integrity, and obvious devotion to Sarah. Elena had watched him light up whenever Sarah entered a room, had seen the protective care he showed her, and had come to think of him as the son she'd never had. He called this morning, Elena said. Marcus, he wanted to make sure he had the right time to be here, and to ask if there was anything he could do to help. That man adores you, Sarah. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus stood in his small apartment, staring at himself in the full-length mirror he'd installed specifically for this day. He wore a charcoal gray suit that Sarah had helped him pick out, with a silver tie that matched the locket he'd given her years ago. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his tie for the third time. At 52, Marcus had never imagined he would stand in someone's wedding party, much less walk a bride down the aisle. The honor still felt almost too large for him to comprehend. In just a few hours, he would escort Sarah to the altar where David waited, formally giving away the woman who had saved his life through simple, consistent kindness. His phone buzzed with a text message from Tommy Rodriguez. Just landed in Chicago with the crew. We're at the hotel, getting ready. Can't wait to see you in action today, Sarge. Semper Fi. Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. His Marine brothers had arrived as promised, 5 of them making the journey to Chicago to witness this day. Tommy had organized everything with military precision, coordinating travel and accommodations for the group. Yesterday, they'd all met for dinner, and Marcus had been amazed at how easily they'd fallen back into their old camaraderie, how naturally the years and distance had melted away. The reunion had been emotional. These men had shared foxholes and fears, had trusted each other with their lives, and had mourned together when some of their brothers hadn't made it home. Seeing Marcus healthy and happy, dressed well, and clear-eyed had moved them all to tears. They'd spent hours sharing stories, catching up on families and careers, and marveling at the journey that had brought them all together again. You know what the best part is? Tommy had said during dinner, "Seeing you smile again, really smile. We were so worried about you, Marcus. When you disappeared, when we couldn't find you, we thought the worst sometimes. But look at you now. Look at what you've built." Marcus had told them about Sarah, about their friendship, about how she'd seen past his circumstances to the man he'd once been and could be again. He described their morning breakfasts, her unwavering faith in him, and the way she'd slowly helped him rebuild not just his life, but his sense of worth. "She sounds like a special woman," said Jake Morrison, a former corporal who now worked as a firefighter in Denver. "She is," Marcus had replied. "She's the kind of person who makes you want to be better, not because she expects it, but because she believes you already are." Now, as Marcus prepared for the biggest day of his civilian life, he thought about Helen and how she would have loved Sarah. Helen had always believed in the power of kindness, had always said that the measure of a person was how they treated those who could do nothing for them in return. Sarah embodied those values completely. At the church, preparations were in full swing. St. Catherine's was a small, historic Catholic church with soaring ceilings and beautiful stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns across the wooden pews. David Chun stood at the altar with his best man, his brother Michael, both of them wearing dark blue suits and nervous smiles. David had spent the morning with his family, sharing breakfast and stories and trying to calm his wedding day jitters. His parents had flown in from California, and his sister from Seattle, all of them eager to meet the woman who had captured their son's heart. They'd heard countless stories about Sarah over the past year, about her compassion and dedication, her work with disadvantaged populations, and her unusual friendship with a veteran she'd helped off the streets. "Are you ready for this?" Michael asked his brother as they waited in the small room behind the altar. "I've been ready since the day I met her," David replied. "She's everything I ever hoped to find in a partner. Kind, strong, funny, beautiful inside and out. I'm the luckiest man alive." Outside the church, a small crowd was beginning to gather. Sarah had wanted a modest wedding, but word had somehow spread through the hospital where she worked, and many of her colleagues had come to celebrate. There were also several veterans from the support group Marcus had joined, men and women who had become his extended family as he'd rebuilt his life. But the group that drew the most attention was the 5 Marines in their dress blue uniforms, standing at attention near the church entrance. Passers-by stopped to stare at the impressive sight. Tall, proud men in spotless uniforms with polished brass buttons and white peaked caps, their bearing unmistakably military. Tommy Rodriguez, now a master sergeant with ribbons and decorations earned over 20 years of service, led the group. Beside him stood Jake Morrison, Carlos Delgado, who'd become a teacher in Texas, Pete Williams, a successful contractor in Virginia, and Sam Chun, no relation to David, who'd stayed in the Marines and achieved the rank of staff sergeant. "Think the Sarge is nervous?" Pete asked, adjusting his white gloves. "Probably," Tommy replied, "but he'll be fine. Marcus never let us down when it mattered, and he won't today either." "I still can't believe we're all here," Sam said. "After all these years, after everything that happened, it feels like a miracle." "That's exactly what it is," Carlos said firmly. "A miracle," named Sarah Martinez, who saw our sergeant when he couldn't see himself. Inside the church, Sarah was putting the finishing touches on her appearance in the small bridal room. Her dress was elegant in its simplicity, a flowing A-line gown in ivory silk with delicate beadwork along the bodice, and her grandmother's pearl earrings. Her dark hair was swept up in a soft updo with small white flowers woven throughout. Jennifer, her maid of honor and fellow nurse, helped her with the final adjustments. "You look absolutely radiant," Jennifer said, "like you're glowing from the inside out." "I feel like I am," Sarah replied, touching the silver locket Marcus had given her, which she wore beneath her dress, close to her heart. "I feel like everything in my life has led to this moment, all the choices I've made, all the people I've met. It all feels connected somehow. Even meeting Marcus? Especially meeting Marcus. If I hadn't met him, I wouldn't be the same person David fell in love with. Marcus taught me things about loyalty and courage and resilience that made me a better person. He showed me what it really means to honor the people we love." A soft knock at the door interrupted them, and Elena peeked in. "Mija, Marcus is here. He wanted to know if you're ready." Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. "Send him in." Marcus entered the room, and both Sarah and Jennifer gasped. In his perfectly fitted suit, with his silver hair neatly combed and his face clean-shaven, Marcus looked distinguished and handsome. But more than that, he looked proud and confident in a way that transformed his entire presence. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder, "you look absolutely beautiful." "So do you," she replied, tears threatening to spill over. "You look like the man I always knew you were." Marcus approached her carefully, as if she were made of precious crystal. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wrapped box from his pocket. "Marcus, you've already given me so much. Please, open it." Sarah unwrapped the box to find a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm attached, a tiny pair of angel wings. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I wanted you to have something that would remind you that to everyone whose life you've touched, you're an angel. To me, to David, to every patient you've cared for, every person you've shown kindness to. You're an angel walking among us, Sarah, and I wanted you to remember that always." Sarah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Jennifer quickly moved to dab them away, without smudging her makeup, while Marcus fastened the bracelet around Sarah's wrist. "Thank you," Sarah managed, "for everything. For being here, for being you, for showing me what family really means." "Thank you," Marcus replied, "for giving me back my life. For seeing who I could be when I'd forgotten myself. For trusting me with this moment." Elena appeared in the doorway again. "It's time," she said gently. Marcus offered Sarah his arm with formal dignity. "Miss Martinez, would you do me the honor of allowing me to escort you to your wedding?" Sarah laughed through her tears, placing her hand on his arm. "The honor is mine, Mr. Thompson." As they walked toward the church sanctuary, Marcus felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced since Helen's death. He was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, surrounded by people who loved and respected him. The broken man who had once sat against a brick wall in Lincoln Park was gone, replaced by someone who had rediscovered his worth and purpose. "Are you ready?" he asked Sarah as they paused outside the sanctuary doors. "With you beside me? I'm ready for anything," she replied. The doors opened, and the assembled guests rose to their feet. But before they could take their first step down the aisle, Sarah gasped audibly. There, standing at attention in the front pews, were not just the 5 Marines Marcus had told her about, but 7 additional men in dress blue uniforms. Marcus's eyes widened in shock and recognition. Tommy had managed to find and bring not just their immediate squad, but Marines from their entire platoon. 12 men total, standing in perfect formation, their white gloves gleaming and their faces split by enormous grins. "Surprise, Sarge," Tommy called out softly, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed sanctuary. Marcus felt his knees wobble slightly, overwhelmed by the sight of his brothers, by the effort they'd made to be there, by the honor they were showing him. And Sarah, "Can you make it down the aisle?" Sarah whispered, concerned by his reaction. Marcus straightened his shoulders, drawing on the leadership training that had never truly left him. "Ma'am, these Marines didn't travel hundreds of miles to watch their sergeant fall apart. We're going to walk down this aisle like we own the place." Sarah squeezed his arm, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Then, let's show them what we're made of." The traditional wedding march began to play, and Marcus Thompson, former homeless veteran and current hero to the woman beside him, began the most important march of his life. With each step toward the altar, toward David, toward the celebration of love and family and second chances, Marcus felt the last pieces of his broken life clicking into place. Behind them, 12 Marines stood at perfect attention, honoring their sergeant and the angel who had brought him home. As Sarah and Marcus made their way down the aisle, the entire congregation seemed to hold its breath. The sight of the distinguished veteran escorting the radiant bride, flanked by 12 Marines in full dress uniform, was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed at a wedding. There wasn't a dry eye in the church as guests took in the profound significance of the moment. David Chun waited at the altar, his own emotions barely in check as he watched his bride approach. But his eyes were drawn equally to Marcus, the man who had become so important to both of them over the past year. David had heard the stories, had seen the transformation, but witnessing this moment made everything real in a way that words never could. When they reached the altar, Marcus turned to face Sarah, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. According to tradition, this was where he would formally give her away, but Sarah had asked for something different. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the priest asked. Marcus cleared his throat, his voice strong and clear as it carried throughout the sanctuary. "Sarah gives herself as a woman of strength and independence, but she does so surrounded by the love and support of all who know her worth. Her chosen family stands with her today, promising to support and honor this union." It was a departure from tradition, but it perfectly captured who Sarah was and what this moment represented. She wasn't being transferred from one man to another, but was choosing to join her life with David's while surrounded by the love of the family she had built through kindness and compassion. Marcus then turned to David, placing Sarah's hand in his. "David," he said solemnly, "I entrust you with the care of the most remarkable woman I have ever known. She has the heart of a healer, the spirit of an angel, and the strength of a warrior. Love her, protect her, and never take for granted the gift you've been given." David nodded, understanding the weight of Marcus's words. "I promise," he said simply, and Marcus knew he meant it. As Marcus moved to take his seat in the front pew between Elena and Tommy Rodriguez, Sarah caught his hand briefly. "Thank you," she whispered, and Marcus knew she meant not just for walking her down the aisle, but for everything they had shared, everything they had become to each other. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. David and Sarah had written their own vows, and their words spoke of partnership, mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to building a life based on service to others. When Sarah spoke about learning the meaning of true strength from someone who had faced his darkest moments and chosen to keep fighting, her eyes found Marcus in the front row. When David talked about being inspired by Sarah's example of seeing the best in people, of extending kindness without expectation of return, everyone in the congregation understood that he was talking about more than just romantic love. He was talking about the kind of love that builds communities, that heals wounds, that transforms lives. After the rings were exchanged and the couple was pronounced husband and wife, David and Sarah kissed to thunderous applause. But the most moving moment came immediately after, when the 12 Marines spontaneously rose to their feet in perfect unison, coming to attention as a sign of respect and honor. The reception was held in the church's fellowship hall, which had been decorated with simple elegance. White lights strung from the ceiling, round tables with white linens, and small arrangements of spring flowers, and photographs documenting David and Sarah's relationship displayed throughout the room. But the centerpiece was a table dedicated to Marcus's journey, featuring photos from their early breakfast together, images of his graduation from the job training program, and pictures of their growing friendship over the years. Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers throughout the evening. Hospital staff who had watched Sarah's transformation over the years wanted to meet the man who had inspired such dedication. Veterans from Marcus's support group expressed their admiration for how far he'd come. But the most meaningful conversations were with the Marines who had traveled so far to be there. "You know what I love most about this?" said Jake Morrison as he and Marcus watched Sarah and David dance their first dance as a married couple. "Seeing you smile like that. Seeing you proud of yourself instead of ashamed. We've all been worried about you for so long, and now look at you. You're exactly who we always knew you could be." "I lost myself for a while," Marcus admitted. "Lost sight of everything that mattered. But Sarah never stopped believing that the man I used to be was still in there somewhere. She helped me find my way back." "No," said Tommy, joining the conversation. "She helped you find your way forward. This isn't the same Marcus we served with, as good as he was. This is a better version. Someone who's been tested by fire and come through stronger." Carlos Delgado nodded in agreement. "The way these people look at you, Marcus, the respect they show you, that's not pity or charity. That's genuine admiration for what you've accomplished. You've become a leader again, just in a different way." As the evening progressed, Marcus was asked to give a speech. He hadn't prepared anything formal, preferring to speak from the heart. Standing before the assembled guests, he felt the same sense of responsibility he'd once felt addressing his Marines. But this time it was colored with joy rather than the weight of war. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "But I'd be failing my duty if I didn't say a few words about what today means, not just to David and Sarah, but to all of us who've been touched by their love story." He paused, looking out at the faces before him, Sarah and David beaming at the head table, his Marine brothers standing along the walls, Elena dabbing at her eyes, and dozens of others who had been drawn into this celebration of love and redemption. 4 years ago, I was a broken man who thought his life was over. I'd lost my way, lost my purpose, lost my faith in myself and in the goodness of the world. I was sitting on a cold street corner, invisible to most people who passed by, when an angel stopped and asked if I was hungry. Marcus's voice caught slightly, but he continued. "That angel was Sarah Martinez, and she didn't just feed my body that day. She fed my soul. She saw past the circumstances I'd fallen into and recognized the man I'd once been, the man I could be again. Week after week, month after month, she showed up. Not because she had to, not because it was easy, but because she believed in the power of simple human kindness." Sarah was crying openly now, as were many others in the room. "Sarah taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about choosing to love someone, to stand by them, to believe in them even when they can't believe in themselves. She gave me back my dignity, my purpose, my faith in humanity. And today, she honored me by asking me to walk her down the aisle to marry the man who loves her as much as she deserves to be loved." Marcus turned to address the Marines directly. "To my brothers in uniform who've traveled so far to be here, You reminded me today of who I used to be, but more importantly, you've shown me that brotherhood doesn't end when the uniforms come off. You've reminded me that once a Marine, always a Marine, and that the values we swore to uphold, honor, courage, commitment, those don't disappear even when we stumble. He faced the entire room again. David and Sarah, your love story isn't just about the two of you finding each other. It's about how love ripples outward, touching everyone around it. The love you share made room for a broken veteran to become part of your family. It brought together Marines from across the country. It created connections between people who might never have met otherwise. That's the power of real love. It multiplies, it heals, it transforms. Marcus raised his glass of champagne. So I ask everyone here to join me in toasting not just David and Sarah's marriage, but the kind of love that makes the world better, one person at a time. To love that sees potential where others see problems, that offers hope instead of judgment, that builds bridges instead of walls. The room erupted in applause and cheers. As Marcus made his way back to his seat, he was embraced by his Marine brothers, by Elena, by countless guests who had been moved by his words and his story. Later in the evening, as the celebration began to wind down, Sarah pulled Marcus aside for a private moment. They stepped outside into the warm spring air, away from the music and laughter. "I have something for you," Sarah said, reaching into her small purse. She pulled out an envelope with Marcus's name written in her careful handwriting. "Sarah, you don't need to give me anything. Today has been more than enough." "Open it," she insisted. Inside the envelope was a photograph from earlier that day, Marcus walking her down the aisle, both of them smiling, with the Marines standing at attention in the background. But there's also a letter written on Sarah's personal stationery. "Dear Marcus," she read aloud softly, "I wanted you to have something that captured this moment, but also words that you could keep and read whenever you need to remember who you are and how much you matter. You asked me once why I stopped that first morning, why I offered to buy you breakfast. The truth is, I don't know exactly. Maybe it was the way you carried yourself, even in your darkest moment. Maybe it was the respect you showed that first waitress, or the way you looked me in the eye when you said thank you. Maybe it was just instinct, or fate, or God putting the right people in the right place at the right time. What I do know is that meeting you changed my life as much as it changed yours. You taught me about real courage, not the kind that wins battles, but the kind that gets you up every morning when staying down would be easier. You showed me what integrity looks like when it's tested by impossible circumstances. You demonstrated that a person's worth isn't determined by their worst moments, but by their willingness to keep trying, keep fighting, keep believing in better days. Marcus, you didn't just become part of my family. You helped me understand what family really means. You taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice we make every day to see the best in each other, to support each other through difficult times, to celebrate each other's victories no matter how small. Today, walking down that aisle with you, I felt my father's presence. But I also felt something else. I felt proud. Proud to have you beside me, proud of the journey we've shared, proud of the man you've become. You are my hero, Marcus Thompson, not because of the battles you fought overseas, but because of the battle you fought right here to reclaim your life and your hope. I love you like a father, like a brother, like family. Always remember that you are worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of all the good things that are coming your way. Your story isn't over, Marcus. It's just beginning a new chapter. With all my love and gratitude, Sarah. Marcus had to stop several times as he read, overcome with emotion. When he finished, he carefully folded the letter and put it back in an envelope, knowing it would become one of his most treasured possessions. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for seeing who I was when I couldn't see it myself, for never giving up on me, for making me part of your family, for giving my life meaning again." "Thank you," Sarah replied, "for being the best friend, the best father figure, the best example of courage and honor I could have asked for. Thank you for showing me that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes they're sitting on a park bench waiting for someone to notice their worth." They embraced, both of them crying again, both of them grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them to this moment. As the last guests began to leave, the 12 Marines gathered around Marcus for a final group photo. They stood in formation, proud and straight, surrounding their former sergeant who had found his way home not through military precision, but through the simple kindness of a woman who saw past his circumstances to his character. "This isn't goodbye," Tommy said as they prepared to head back to their various homes across the country. "We're family now, all of us. This wedding proved that. We're going to stay in touch, get together regularly, be the brothers we always should have been." "Agreed," Marcus said, his voice strong and certain. "We've all learned too much about the importance of family to let distance or time separate us again." As David and Sarah prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Sarah hugged Marcus one more time. "Take care of yourself," she said. "And remember what I wrote in that letter. Your story is just beginning." Marcus watched them drive away, rice and flower petals still scattered on the ground, the sound of celebration still echoing in his ears. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment, from the depths of despair to this celebration of love and family and redemption. Tommy Rodriguez came up beside him, both men still in their dress uniforms. "So what now, Sarge? What's the next chapter look like?" Marcus smiled, feeling more hopeful about the future than he had in years. "I don't know exactly, but I know it's going to involve helping other veterans find their way back, just like Sarah helped me. I know it's going to involve this family we've rebuilt. And I know it's going to be about paying forward the kindness I received when I needed it most." "Sounds like a good mission," Tommy said. "Count us in." As Marcus drove home that night, still wearing his wedding attire, he thought about Helen and how proud she would have been to see this day. He thought about the Marines who had honored him with their presence, about Sarah and David beginning their new life together, about the ripple effects of kindness that had brought them all together. Most of all, he thought about the power of second chances, about the importance of never giving up on people, and about how sometimes the most broken among us can become the strongest, not despite our struggles, but because of them. Marcus Thompson had started that day as a man walking a bride down the aisle. He ended it as something more, a father, a brother, a hero, and living proof that with enough love, faith, and determination, anyone can find their way home.